Hello everyone, welcome to our last video here on histology. This one will cover muscle and neural tissue. So we'll start with muscle tissue. There are three types of muscle tissue, and all the three types of muscle tissue specialize in contracting to generate force. You can lump the three types of muscle tissue into two types, what's called striated muscle and non-striated muscle. Striated muscle is going to be muscle tissue that has a dark band, light band pattern. These dark and light bands are called striations. And the two types of muscle tissue that have those striations are skeletal muscle tissue and cardiac muscle tissue. The one that doesn't is smooth muscle tissue. Smooth muscle tissue is called non-striated because it does not have those alternating dark and light bands like the skeletal muscle and cardiac muscle do. All right, so let's look at these muscle tissues one at a time. So first is skeletal muscle tissue. So skeletal muscle tissue, you're going to have a bunch of these big, long cells. So we're looking at a longitudinal section where you can see the cell go all the way across the field of view, and it'll go way past the field of view. So like each long stripe like this is going to be one of these individual muscle cells. Now, muscle cells are actually multinucleate. That means they have multiple nuclei, and their nuclei are peripheral, so they're usually at the edge. You're never going to see nuclei in skeletal muscle that are in the center of the cell. They're always at the edges. Now, what you definitely see in these two images are the striations, because these two slides have an extra stain that really emphasizes the striations. So it looks like somebody put a fingerprint on these two slides. Those are the striations, right? Notice that there's a thin light band and then a thin dark band, and a thin light band and a thin dark band, thin light band, thin dark band. So those are your striations. That's what skeletal and cardiac muscle have. All right, so next is cardiac muscle. Cardiac muscle is also striated. You can see that most clearly in this image down here. You don't see it so much up here, but it is there. But you see the dark band, light band pattern, looks like a fingerprint. Those are the striations. Now, cardiac muscle cells are actually short and branched. And where the cardiac muscle cells connect to each other, there's actually a lot of membrane proteins. And those membrane proteins make it difficult for light to pass through. So where you have cardiac muscle cells connecting to each other, you're going to see these extra dark lines that are parallel to the striations. These are called intercalated discs. And intercalated discs are only found in cardiac muscle. They're not found anywhere else. And so these intercalated discs are the dead giveaway that you're looking here at. Sorry guys, the intercalated discs are a dead giveaway that you're looking at cardiac muscle. So I know in this image it's not as clear, but you can see like a dark line there, a dark line there, a dark line there. Okay, they're kind of all over the place. They're just not as clear as they are down here. The other thing about cardiac muscle is not, muscle cells are not multinucleate. They have one large central nucleus. And so it's not all that uncommon for you to see a big nucleus in the center of a pink stripe here, like in the center of a cell, because that's where those nuclei are found. You won't see that in skeletal muscle. Big giant nucleus like this right in the center. So it's kind of another thing to look for. Next is smooth muscle. So big thing about smooth muscle is there's no striations, right? Notice there's no dark band, light band pattern at all here. So smooth muscle cells are often what are called spindle shaped. So spindle shaped cells are just basically long, thin cells here. Sorry, I tried to draw the nucleus and I kind of messed up the nucleus, but the shape of the cells is pretty much like I'm talking about. So you got these long, skinny cells, and they're all kind of attached to each other, end to end, side to side. And so you get this tissue that has sort of a smeared appearance to it. Smooth muscle cells, like cardiac muscle cells, have really large, elongated nuclei that are in the center of the cell, and so you do see a lot of the nuclei in this tissue. And it's totally different from what we saw in skeletal muscle or even in cardiac muscle. But I would look for that smeared appearance that you can see sort of in both these images. This area down here is where the smooth muscle is in cross-section. So this spindle-shaped cell is actually coming out of the screen at you here. And so basically what you've done is you've cut it down the middle like that so that it looks like a bullseye. Okay, so it looks like a bullseye, kind of like that. And so that's why this looks different. It's really the same thing. It's just you cut it in a different way, and so the cell looks a little different. Last tissue is neural tissue, and there aren't any neural tissue types. There's just one neural tissue, and it's all basically the same. So you can tell you're looking at neural tissue because you'll just see mostly these two cell types. Lots of little teeny tiny nuclei all over the place. Those are the glial cells or the neuroglia. And then these big giant cells with a big nucleus and a really prominent nucleolus, which is a dark spot in the center. These are neurons. And really, it's the neurons that kind of give away the neural tissue. You see this big neuron, it has a bunch of these branches extending off of it. That neuron tells you you're looking at neural tissue.